I actually had a doc who said to me he wanted to be a better, I think it was tweeterer, if I get that correctly. And it took me a while. I'm like, do you mean like you want to do Twitter? And he's like, yeah, I want to tweet. Okay. Again, it's why we came up with the name for our practice marketing side of P3, practice marketing, because it's, Doc, let's just focus on what patients do you want to see? What pathologies do you want to treat? What procedures do you want to do? Let's stick with those 3 Ps. We'll get back to whatever it is that you're looking at, but let's focus on that first, and then we can go build something.
That was Scott Zeitzer, the president of Health Connective, a custom marketing solutions company for medtech and pharma, offering web application design, website design, and marketing services for practices. Scott and Michael Roberts, the company's marketing director, also host the incredibly popular podcast, Paradigm Shift of Healthcare. The two joined me to discuss a recent 2-part series on their show called Nailing Your Marketing Mix, highlighting how providers can sometimes lose their way in marketing their practice and how to get them back on track. You're listening to What's My Tagline, a podcast focused on conversations around marketing, PR, social media, and more in the healthcare B2B space. I'm your host, Carol Flagg of Answers Media Network. Learn more about the show on the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Carol Flagg or on LinkedIn. And now let's hear more from Scott and Michael. Michael, Scott, welcome back to What's My Tagline. I'm so excited to be talking with you today. As I said in my intro, you guys recently did a 2-part series with your own podcast, Paradigm Shift of Healthcare, about nailing your marketing mix. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. But as you know, my first question of all my guests is, if you had to describe yourself as a tagline, what would it be?
Tagline for us, I would say, like, for the two of us, and really probably for the company itself, like, we're really kind of looking at this tagline of tying your strategy together. We end up helping companies build out a lot of pieces. So, we may be building out a program, we may be building out a marketing campaign, and everybody at the strategy phase has this great idea of, like, here's where I want to go and here's where I want to do. And then they get to the actual doing of it, and there are so many shiny objects that catch everybody's attention. And so it's really easy. And it could just be because, you're dealing with politics or whatever, but there's so many things that distract people from kind of executing on that strategy. So that's really where we're trying to position ourselves right now, is really focusing in on helping people pull all those pieces together.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than most people think. We were just on a call where we were going over a online marketing campaign for a large practice, and there was just a lot of groundwork that had to be done. And you end the presentation, and the first question was, "What about Instagram? Can we do that?" Sure, man. We can
Absolutely.
But you think you want to have a website first, or some sort of idea about what you're trying to accomplish online before we worry about Instagram? And I actually had a doc who said to me he wanted to be a better, I think he was tweeterer, if I get that correctly. And it took me a while. I'm like, do you mean like you want to do Twitter? And he was like, yeah, I want to tweet. I'm like, okay. Again, it's why we came up with the name for our practice marketing side of P3, practice marketing, because it's, Doc, let's just focus on what patients do you want to see? What pathologies do you want to treat? What procedures do you want to do? Let's stick with those 3 Ps, and we'll get back to whatever it is that you're looking at, but let's focus on that first, and then we can go build something.
Right. Well, that is, and this was not intentional, but that is a terrific segue actually into my first question, because
there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Because on this 2-part podcast about nailing your marketing mix, you actually start on the first podcast episode about talking about this triage process to look at what a practice's marketing, what state they're currently at. And that really is about addressing these 3 Ps. If you could explain that to our listening audience, that would be great.
Michael, do you want to jump on that one, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll start, kind of give you the framework around it. We had so many conversations with practices where we were getting in the room and it was basically, hey, what should we do? And, the answer, we build a lot of websites. So our answer came back a lot of times as well, build a website. well, is that the most important thing? What's wrong with my current website? What's going on? And so rather than just continuing down that pathway of a lot of mismatched expectations, we really try to start honing in more deeply on what if we actually took some time and really came back with like, here are the top things you need. And whether you work with us or whether you work with somebody else, please focus your attention here. And so it helps us have a much more structured conversation around how we can help. Because, look, at the end of the day, other people do what we do too. And at the end of the day, we're hoping that this physician, this practice is going to be able to help their patients most effectively. That's what we're after. And we want to make a living and all those fun things, of course, too. But being able to help those practices focus their attention seems to be the major hurdle, I think, that we're always trying to overcome, because everybody's so busy, especially doctors. So how do we get them focused on, here's the top thing that you really got to handle? And then, Scott really leans into that kind of triage language to help get across that whole framework.
Yeah, I do, because I basically worked through college as an ENT, and they would just hammer into you airway, breathing, circulation. And it's true. If you think about that Instagram conversation, it's like, hey, that's great, but you need a website. And on the website, you need good content on the site
right.
that describes, your practice, its philosophy, what you're doing, for patients. And usually reputation marketing gets added into that mix, because it's a great external signal that actually says, yeah, they're good at what they do over there. And it tells Google that, they're over there as well. So there's some really basic stuff that I think helps a lot. And even, because we're talking a lot about the practice, like practices and marketing for practices, but it translates just as well into larger groups where we've worked with, Fortune 500 companies, heck, Fortune 50 companies. And hey, man, the shiny thing appears there too, right, Michael? Like, we'll have a conversation going, wait a minute, how did we get here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. How we got
especially when you're,
yeah,
when you're responsible for like a portfolio of websites, like the scale is obviously so much different at that stage, but you've got probably like the biggest thing you're responsible for as a marketing person, and then all the other little things that kind of feed up into that. And if you ignore, or if you just pay less attention to, I don't think that people are trying to deliberately ignore. It's just, this thing kind of fell off my radar for a bit, and you'll go back and just do like kind of just an initial check on things. It's like, did you know that Google can't see that site? Did you know that, like whatever it is that's happened. And in the midst of COVID times, when everybody's had a few other things on their mind, like this stuff happens. And so gotta make time to go back and revisit it.
Yeah. And you talk some about that too, as well, in the sense of, and we're all sort of guilty of this too. We see something out there, and like right now, I'm like, Clubhouse. What's that? We got to get involved. Right? Just we are all guilty of that. It is that like you said, that Scott was saying, the shiny new object kind of like dangling in front, when really maybe there is some work that needs to be done. Not that we shouldn't try something new, but maybe there is work that needs to be done first. That would make that endeavor even more. That would make that endeavor more successful,
without a doubt. And when you talk about when we're talking to surgeons, saying something like airway, breathing, circulation, it's built into their brain. Like nothing is done until that's settled, right? In the middle of surgery, if the patient's not breathing, it really doesn't matter how well that total joint case went. And so, all kidding aside, it's so built into what they do. It's that kind of thing that you tend to forget because it's not hammered into you until it happens to you. I'm talking about marketing versus, that shiny object versus the baseline stuff. And I really do think having that baseline stuff somewhere, whether that's a reminder, in your calendar to kind of take a look at it once a quarter or whatever makes sense, or whether that's some sort of note, that you put in your book that you copy over and over. We all use different ways to remember stuff. It's just critical to kind of remember the basics.
Yeah. And the basics. And then also, when you get those basics down and you're ready to maybe branch out a little bit, you guys also talk about, let's give you realistic expectations as to what that looks like, right? The example I think one of you uses one tweet does not make you a success on Twitter, or your client who said,
Sure.
wanted to be a tweeter, or, whatever that was. And so, there are things that need to go into that marketing mix, which is obviously a big conversation you guys have every single day with your clients. That marketing mix does need to include new tactics and different things. But then also, understand what that means. How as an organization, I have to keep, like, Scott was saying, the airways open and all the, the basic things for the survival of my marketing program, keep an eye on all that. But yet I've got to look to the future as well.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much around just making marketing work, right? Like I totally agree. We've got to keep looking for how do we keep improving things? How do we keep adding in new processes? But I'm certainly guilty of trying to see what's next, trying to think about how to add on the next new thing, whatever that new thing is, and not stopping long enough to go like, but how's the blog? How's the blog working? How's the podcast performing? How's the, are we really getting everything out of that we can? And then, if we've got that core working, let's keep looking for how we can improve. I think some of our biggest, steps forward around like how we've interacted with clients have not necessarily been due to a new technology, but much more so about really tightening up processes, introducing new thinking, introducing new modes of success that others have proven out. And it's not just a flash in the pan implementation, but getting everybody on the same page. And, we joke around because we do work with some very, very large clients. We're a small company. We're about 15 people. Getting 15 people on the same page is remarkably difficult. It's far more difficult than it should be. And so trying to get 15 people to agree on something versus trying to get, hundreds of people and, what much larger companies are facing. But just going back to that, like I'm all for new tactics, all for new strategy, but man, there's enough challenges as there are, in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And, just to jump on that, I go back to like, look, if your core things are working and you've identified what those core things are and you've set aside time to continue to make sure that it is working, that's when you start looking at other things. And you kind of set expectations both internally and externally, right? So let's just take something as simple as, say, Twitter. Well, if you're not into Twitter, like I can't tell you how many times I've talked to surgeons who say they want to be great with Twitter or Facebook. And I'll go, all right, that's great. So are you on Facebook a lot? And they'll go, no, I hate it. I'm never on. I'll laugh and I'll go, well, who do you think's going on it? And they said, well, can't you just do it? And I said, well, I could, but number one, it's not a cost-effective way for me to post stuff for you. I could, but what do I know about what you're doing specifically? And I'll give you a great example. We had a practice that had a Facebook page and they're asking us about it. And we're all looking at it together and we start laughing. We go, man, the taco recipe looks terrific here. I mean, I want to try that. It has nothing to do with whether I'm going to use this particular orthopedic practice or not, but I'm going to tell you something. The guacamole recipe looks wonderful. And they were obviously just pulling content and just shoving it up there. And I believe some agency was doing it for them. And it's like, that's that internal versus external, right? Expectation. It's like, okay, we want to go do something. What are you expecting to get done with it And I'm talking about like what kind of customers you want to attract, what kind of brand are you trying to do, whatever that is, right? And then internally, like, do we have enough people to actually do this? Because I think that's kind of as critical a component. Michael, you make a joke about we're only 15 people, but if we don't sell what we're trying to get done to those 15 people, it doesn't get done.
Yeah, entirely. And in some of the examples that we're talking about here, some of these references that were thrown out around whether somebody else can do your social media or not, these are for very small organizations we're talking about. So, think like, just get outside of healthcare for a second, just think like a very small business. You have such a limited marketing budget. Where are you putting that time and energy? And I think that it's so easy to do it at very large scale as well, but it's so easy to just throw out a lot of effort and feel like something should be working because I'm busy at marketing. So it's got to work, right? Like, I'm going to get something back from this. And then people get so frustrated with it. And going back to setting expectations, I tried Facebook for a month and I don't have enough patience yet. So obviously Facebook's broken. Obviously it doesn't work.
Right.
That's something everybody has to deal with.
Yeah. And almost every, I talk to a lot of, marketing folks myself, obviously, for both, our digital lead gen programs and of course for radio and podcast shows. And it's so interesting. Like, I don't think I've ever talked to a marketing person who said to me, yeah, Carol, I actually have the perfect mix of marketing and all of it works 100%. Right. And I'm so happy with our marketing efforts.
And the next day came.
Right. I've yet to come across that. Right.
Yeah. It's all about balance. I mean, when you think about it, it really is about balance. And if you're the small practice all the way up to, the Fortune 100 companies, it really is about, hey, what can we get done that makes sense? Because there's always a limit on your time. There's always a limit on your focus, and setting those expectations and coming back. That was the big point about it was, we can come up with all the ways you can fall down, whether you're large or whether you're small, but really it is like consistently going back and saying, is this right? Because just saying, quote, a checkbox for like social media done, we're on Twitter and Facebook.
Right.
I mean,
right. Gotta add Instagram though.
Right. Oh no. That's where you go back to like, well, what were we trying to accomplish by doing X? Whatever that X is, right? And having that somewhere so that when you go back to go take a look at how we're doing, it's like, I can't tell you how many times we've all said to ourselves, like, I don't need to really write any notes. I know what I'm going to do when I come back and look at this. And then we look back at it and we go, what were we thinking we were doing back in 2019?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
So funny. And one of the things that I want to sort of get back to that, the original, the 3 Ps, because one thing that you guys talk a lot about, no matter what your marketing mix is, right? No matter, whether you're adding these new things to your marketing mix or you're still sort of triaging and getting your ducks in a row. One thing that you two talk a lot about is landing pages.
Yeah, Michael, why don't you jump on landing pages?
Yeah, let's especially, like why, for a practice that is like so critical. Like it's like to me, when you talk about that triage process, the landing page is the heart still pumping, right? I mean, that's kind of what I get from you guys. That like, this is the heart of, perhaps, or and the start of looking at your marketing.
We work primarily in orthopedics. That's orthopedics, spine, neuro. Like those are kind of like our core fields that we really work in a lot. And, it can be a harder decision than just, I looked at this one doctor profile and now I feel fine about booking an appointment here. Now I'm ready to let this person operate on my hip because I saw their site one time. But you'd be surprised, and maybe everybody on that's listening to the podcast would already know these kinds of things in terms of where practices are starting from. But even before you get something as really truly dedicated and optimized as a streamlined landing page, can I just find the button to click to be able to schedule an appointment?
Right.
And that should be there. It should be easy, right? It should
seems
be
so
apparent,
simple.
but and especially because you deal with practices and they're very lean organization depending on the size of the practice. So maybe there's not a dedicated marketing person, and the person that's responsible for the office administration and making sure that everybody's schedules are right is also taking care of the website. And look, all the doctors are on there and the hours are correct. Like, what more do you need? So you've kind of got sometimes like that very like harried, kind of office environment. So giving some outside perspective to say like, look, patient's really missing this, can be really helpful. But as you get more advanced, as you get kind of more streamlined with the process, or, let's say that you're a practice that's much more about cash pay needs, so you're regenerative medicine, or you're, dental even, or you're some of these other kinds of fields where there's much more a focus on sort of that like consumer experience. You're really going to need things like landing pages. And when they click on that ad, it has to be all right there. It has to be all very clear. It has to really like that form works exactly the way that it's supposed to work. They get it into the automation that they're supposed to be in, all those kinds of things that you take as a given, that I put the form there. So of course it's going to work. And of course it's going to go into the automation system the way I hope it will. But there's so many areas for that to break, so many ways that process can break down. And so, some of the things that we're talking about on the podcast as well, sort of some upcoming episodes, are even around things like, are you really testing that? Are you just having somebody come on as a patient, and go through the process of what they would do to just try and book an appointment, or to try and get that download, to maybe learn more about this type of procedure, or to learn more about why this is useful for them. So there's so many ways, again, depending on the level of the sophistication of the practice and marketing needs, but there's always that spot where the tool can break if somebody didn't set it up correctly, or if somebody just didn't kind of follow that through. But yeah, that landing page is such a make or break experience. And so often it falls to the neglect, of, oh, well,
Right.
it's out there, it's working, it's fine. It's like,
Or no, I did it. Check. I'm done. Did you test it? Do you really know that it's working?
Right.
But if you do a good job on it, right, then there's so much that can be done. So and that goes back to like that ABCs, right? So if your landing page is done correctly, if you've got really good content about a particular procedure and you're reassuring the patient that, hey, I think this doctor, this surgeon is the right choice for me. He's walking me through the process and I feel very comfortable about his philosophy. Where's the appointment request? Right.
Right.
And if you have it, hey, that's great. Right. And then, so let's just say we didn't do it right. There's not good content on there. It just says, my favorite is I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I love my children. I trained here. I play golf.
Wow. Yeah.
That's great. Hey, this happens a lot. There'll be like 4 bullet points about what they do, and where they went to school. And they, of course, everybody should know that the residence, the fellowship at blah, blah, blah is the best. Well, maybe an orthopedic, like if you're talking to another orthopedic surgeon, sure, but maybe not, right? And so there's that component of getting information out correctly, then making sure that, you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And this is something Michael and I are starting to look into too, is like, okay, we've done this for a lot of practices where, hey, it's set up correctly. And we're getting people to click on the Facebook ads or whatever. And we're going, well, how many new cases are you getting? Right? That's the next component of it. And I always tell my surgeons, call the front office. Well, no, I can't get through. That's why I call the back line. Well, fellas, guys, gals, you might have an issue, right? I remember I was trying to get a hold of a a surgeon, and I had to listen to, I don't know, press 1, press 2, press 3. I got to finally press 7 to get to the person who was supposedly taking care of Dr. X. And that person, when you got finally to that person, like the physician's assistant, all you heard was like, I think they thought they were leading a message, but they didn't. And all you heard was like the crackling of tape.
Oh,
and then
no. Right.
And you're going, I'm just trying, to help you with your online marketing. Can you imagine if you're a patient?
Right. Well, people's patience level today, of course, is vastly different than it used to be.
Because in the old days, you got a card and Dr. X said, you should go see Dr. Y. And everybody basically saw Dr. Y. That was it. Like, your referring physician said so, right? Now, there's just too many different options. There's too much information. Now, some people in the medical community say, see, that's where it's wrong. This isn't right. This is the failure of the system. They don't trust us. And it's like, no, you've got to build trust. You've got to earn that trust. That information has to be there. And once you do that, that's where Michael and I feel very good, where we are matching up the right patients with the right physicians, with the right surgeons. If you have hip sciatica, you don't want to see a total hip surgeon. You want to see a neurologist.
Yeah. And you two also make a great point, sort of ties into that, these physician practices, you're not competing with WebMD, right? You make that point clearly in the episode, but you're just trying to find your target market. You're trying to align what that service or product is with who the potential patient could be. And then those marketing things around it have to make sense with that, including, let's not forget, how this all looks on a smartphone.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about that. But that's why we do stick with those 3 Ps. Like I always say it, if you want to sprinkle magic pixie dust, what kind of patients do you want to see? What kind of pathologies? Do you want to manage? What kind of procedures do you want to do? And once you start doing that, it's a very, you get away from, whether it's Facebook or landing page design or who's answering the phone. Do they even know what HIPAA is? Let's just get back to the basics. Like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? I'll never forget. There was a friend of mine who finished his fellowship, sports medicine, and called me up and told me this harrowing tale about how he was working really hard, going to the ER constantly and trying to find patients, but he just couldn't grow his sports medicine business. And he's running out the door one day to take care of yet another trauma case that he, of course he knows how to do, but he really wants to do sports medicine. And he hears the front office person say, "Sir, we don't do medicine. We're surgeons. We don't do sports medicine." And the guy just was, no, that's not right. And that's where Michael was getting back to that point about, we're only 15 people. How do we get everybody on the same page? Well, if the person answering the phone doesn't know that sports medicine is part of orthopedic surgery,
right?
That's not that person answering the phone's fault.
Right. No, it's not. Yeah.
Not.
Yeah.
Let's get some training across. I can't tell you how many times, I'll talk to practices and they'll go, yeah, we don't work during lunch. I give everybody off. Like they think it's a great thing, for an hour. I'm like, do you understand that most people at noon, that's when they can make the call? Like they're not allowed to call during office hours.
Right.
Why don't you schedule half the people answering the phone to eat from 11:30 to 12:30 and the other half from 12:30 to 1 and have somebody answer the phones? That would take better care of your patients.
And that seems like that'd be an operational issue, but it is a marketing issue, right? Because
right. It's both. There's an overlap there. Michael, you get into that quite a bit, right?
Every department wants to show how important they are. And so there's this, there's a fine line between marketing is everything. But man,
you mean it's not?
I know. It's hard. It's hard to admit it. I'm not gonna lie, but customer service, operations, all those kinds of things. I talk about some of our, probably biggest gains that we've made over the last years. I would say that some of those areas are where we've seen things really dramatically improve, for like where the marketing and the customer service and the operations, all of it started really, really working much more closely together, so that a process begins in this department, ends up in this department, but there's a clear pathway all the way through, instead of, well, I got this far, now I got to talk to this manager. Now I got this far, now I got to talk to this manager. Because whether you're a small company, whether you're a big company, these are the kinds of, silos we all run into. It's so easy to fall back into that mentality.
Yeah. So I would like to perhaps end our conversation today talking about another thing that you guys talk about quite a bit, this idea of adapting, right? How an organization or practice can adapt to help get the word out about their services and products.
Yeah, I'll kind of jump in on it. If we are focused, and if you are an organization that's had the chance to kind of make sure that your core is solid, right? Like things are working enough, and we've got people that answer the phones, appropriately and know their business and know how to communicate to patients. I think that you have to set aside time as an organization for learning. We've had the chance to do some interviews with folks that talked about training your team and consistently looking forward. And these are the kinds of things that we do a lot ourselves. All of the major changes that are happening in search engine optimization, Google's rolling out again, another thing that we really need to be focusing on, all of the changes around, those web core vitals and all of those kinds of updates that are coming around. Yeah, your site has to be fast on a mobile device. It's not just enough to have it show up eventually. You can't have a page that jumps around because the images are still loading in. And if you're another type of site, all the ads that are coming in as well. It's frustrating. And now it's going to start hurting your search ranking. And so I think that just overall, learning about what's coming and about how patients are communicating differently. And then, taking advantage of that so that you are getting that new information out there. If you have a new procedure that you're adding on, if you have, if you're at a spot where a practice is adding on an ASC or is adding on a second location or a third or fourth or whatever, getting that information out in the right channels. And, you can work with your team to do that, but only if you're consistently learning and consistently looking for those new opportunities.
And test.
Yes. Right. Experiment and test.
Yeah.
I figure just hope for the best. That's kind of my...
It really is. I know we're close to the end of the podcast. We're running out of time, but make sure that you budget time, energy, effort, money, etc., to make sure that it works, because that's what I love about digital is you can tweak it, man. You can make it better. You just got to test it to wonder if it, makes sense.
Yeah. And a digital environment, you get, almost immediate feedback, if not in some cases immediate. It was great. It was great talking with you two again. I really enjoyed the time that we're spending here. And I will definitely count on you coming back, because I know that you've got other things in the hopper. And when it comes to marketing for physician practices, you two are the two that I look to. You can learn more about Scott Zeitzer and Michael Roberts by visiting their company website, healthconnectivetech.com. And be sure to follow Scott and Michael on LinkedIn. Have a guest or topic suggestion for the show? Send me an email at carol@healthcare.radio or message me on Twitter at carolflag or on LinkedIn. Until the next time, I want to know, what's your tagline?